All my life, I was the one everyone blamed. The son who never tried hard enough, the brother who never did anything right. But they never saw the truth. They never saw the nights I stayed awake working, the bills I paid silently, or the tears I hid when they called me lazy. I didn't want their praise, I just wanted peace. And when peace wouldn't come, I decided to leave, leaving behind a letter that would finally make them see who I really was. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the background noise in my own family. Mom worked long hours at a store, exhausted but determined. My brother was the golden child, praised for every small achievement, and my sister had a smile that could melt hearts. Me? I was just there. Whenever something went wrong, the power bill overdue, groceries missing, the Wi-Fi acting up, everyone pointed at me. You're home all day. What do you even do? I'd open my mouth to explain, but then stop. No one listened anyway. What they didn't know was that I did work. Online freelancing, small projects, anything that paid. I didn't make much, but it helped. Enough to quietly cover the bills no one else noticed were overdue. I remember one evening, Mom came home tired. She sighed. The landlord called again about rent. I nodded, pretending to worry, but I'd already paid it that morning. She never knew. At night, I'd hear them in the next room. My brother laughing. He'll never make it in life. My sister agreeing. He's just lazy. And Mom, silent. Her silence hurt more than their words. Every insult I swallowed turned into quiet motivation. Every doubt became a reason to work harder. Still, the more I did, the less they saw. One night, while scrolling through my messages, I saw a text from Mom to my aunt. I'm worried about him. He's wasting his life. I stared at that line for minutes. Wasting my life? The same life I had spent trying to keep them comfortable. The same life that paid their bills when no one else could. It was the first time I felt something break inside me, a small crack in the wall I had built to stay strong. The next morning, I left early for a walk. The street was quiet, the sky still pale. For the first time, I wondered, if I disappeared, would they even notice? Days turned into weeks and my silence became routine. I spoke less, smiled less, and started spending most of my time in my small room upstairs. It was the only place where I didn't feel judged, where I could breathe without hearing someone remind me of what I wasn't. My laptop became my world. I worked late into the night, designing, writing, coding, whatever brought in money. Every small payment I received felt like a tiny victory, even if no one knew about it. Sometimes when I heard Mom worrying about expenses, I'd quietly transfer money to her account. No one ever asked where it came from. They just assumed she had managed somehow. And I let them believe that. One evening, I overheard a conversation that stayed with me for days. Mom was talking to my brother in the kitchen. She said, "Your future looks so bright. I'm proud of you." Then, after a pause, she sighed. "I just wish your brother would do something meaningful too." My brother laughed. "He never will, Mom. Some people just aren't made for success." I froze on the stairs, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to tell them everything, the sleepless nights, the unpaid meals, the sacrifices. But I knew if I did, they would only say I was lying or making excuses. So I went back to my room and closed the door quietly. That night, as I sat in front of my computer, I stared at the open screen and the blinking cursor felt like a heartbeat reminding me that I was still here, still trying. But the question echoed in my head, for what? For whom I kept working anyway. I didn't know how to stop. Months passed. My work improved, clients started paying more, and I began saving. With every dollar earned, I secretly handled things my family didn't even notice. The water bill, my sister's phone repair, even my brother's college application fees. One morning, Mom was surprised. She said, "The electricity company must have made a mistake and the bill's already paid." I smiled faintly and said, "Maybe it's a system update." She laughed, and for a brief second I saw her smile. That same warm smile from my childhood before life made everything heavy. That moment made all my sacrifices worth it, but happiness didn't last long. A week later, while cleaning, my brother found one of my receipts, a payment confirmation for the rent. He came to my room waving it in my face. "Did you pay this?" he shouted. I nodded quietly. "Why would you do that without telling anyone?" he demanded. Mom came in confused. He handed her the paper. "He's been acting like some kind of secret hero." Mom looked at me, not angry, not proud, just tired. You should have told me, she said softly. It's not your responsibility, I wanted to say, but it is. It's always been. Instead, I just said, I wanted to help. She sighed. You need to focus on your life. Stop trying to fix everything, I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Outside, I could hear the hum of traffic and crickets. Inside, silence pressed heavy on my chest. No matter what I did, I was still the same in their eyes. Useless. For years, I had worked in the shadows, hoping one day they would see me. But now I realized something. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to keep their version of me. The lazy one, the failure, the disappointment. That realization hurt more than any insult ever could. I turned on the small lamp beside my bed and pulled out an old notebook. On the first page, I wrote in big letters, "If I ever leave, I'll leave a letter." I didn't know why I wrote it. Maybe it was a way of freeing myself, of saying goodbye before I even left. Because deep down, I knew something had to change. Either they would finally understand me, or I would disappear quietly and let the silence speak for itself. It had been raining for 2 days straight. The sky outside looked gray and tired, just like I felt inside. Mom had asked me to clean the attic since we hadn't touched it in years. It was one of those tasks nobody wanted to do, and somehow it always landed on me. I climbed the old wooden ladder, pushing open the creaky door. The air was thick with dust and memories. Stacks of boxes, old furniture, photo frames. Pieces of a life that once felt simpler. As I began sorting through the mess, I found things I had almost forgotten. My childhood school bag, Dad's old radio, a box full of family photos. For a moment, I sat on the floor, wiping the dust from one photo. It was a picture of all of us. Mom, Dad, my brother, my sister, and me. Dad had his arm around me. I was maybe 5 years old, smiling without fear. Looking at that photo, something in my chest tightened. When did we stop smiling like that? I put it aside and kept digging through the boxes. That's when I found it. An old envelope sealed tight with my name written across the front in Dad's handwriting. The ink had faded, but the letters were clear. For my son. My hands started shaking. Dad had died when I was just 3. How could this still exist? I sat down on the cold floor, heart pounding, and slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Folded neatly, the paper yellowed with time. I could smell the faint scent of old books and dust. I unfolded it carefully. My son, if you are reading this, it means you have grown up. I wish I could be there to see the man you've become. You might not remember me, but I want you to know something very important. The world will not always see your worth. People, even those you love, might call you names, might doubt you, might hurt you. But never forget this. You were born with strength in your heart. You are not useless. You are not weak. You are my greatest hope. Take care of your mother when I'm gone. And when life becomes too heavy, don't lose yourself trying to make everyone else happy. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find peace. Love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision as I read the last line. For the first time in my life, someone had said exactly what I needed to hear, even if it came from a man who was no longer here. I pressed the letter against my chest, crying silently. All the years of pain, rejection, and loneliness came crashing down in that moment. Dad's words echoed in my head. You are not useless. You are my greatest hope. I don't know how long I sat there. The rain outside grew heavier. The roof creaked and the attic felt alive with memories. When I finally stood up, I felt lighter, like I had found the missing part of myself. But that peace came with clarity. Dad's letter wasn't just comfort, and it was a message. I couldn't keep living in a house that only reminded me of pain. I couldn't keep giving to people who never saw my worth. So that night I made my decision. I wrote my own letter, not of anger, but of truth. It started simply, to my family, and I'm not running away. I'm just finally going where I belong. I poured everything into that letter. The sacrifices they never saw. The nights I worked when they slept. The pain of being invisible in my own home. But I also wrote about love. How despite everything, I never stopped caring. When I sealed the envelope, I placed it on the kitchen table, next to Mom's morning teacup. Then I packed my small bag, just a few clothes, my laptop, Dad's letter, and a little cash I had saved. Before leaving, I stood by Mom's door for a moment. She was asleep, the soft sound of her breathing reminding me of all the times she stayed up worrying. I whispered softly, I'm sorry, Mom. I hope one day you'll understand. Then I walked out into the rain, No goodbye, no noise, no drama. Just silence. That night the city felt endless. The rain washed over me as if cleansing years of pain and misunderstanding. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the useless son. I was just a man trying to find peace, carrying the words of a father who believed in me when no one else did. And as the bus left town at dawn, I looked out the window, clutching Dad's letter. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was finally free. The morning I left, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, new, like life was quietly offering me another chance. I boarded a bus heading toward a small city 3 hours away. As it pulled out of town, I looked out the window and whispered to myself, "This is the beginning of my real life." For the first time in years, my heart didn't feel heavy. No guilt, no shame. No more pretending. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I finally loved myself enough to stop proving my worth to people who refused to see it. The city I arrived in wasn't big or bright. It was quiet. A few markets, old buildings, and people who smiled when you passed them on the street. I rented a small room near the bus station. It had cracked walls and a small window, but to me it was freedom. The first few days I did nothing. I just sat by the window, watched the sunset, and listened to the sound of the world outside. It was strange, not hearing anyone shout my name, not hearing criticism, not feeling small. Just peace. Then slowly I opened my laptop again. My clients had sent messages, new offers. I began to work, but this time not for others, not to prove myself, just to build something of my own. Days turned into weeks. Money started coming in again. I opened a small digital service agency online, and within 2 months, I had enough to rent an office space. I named it HopeWorks. It wasn't a big company, but every project, every client, every little success felt like another piece of my soul being rebuilt. Meanwhile, back home, silence had taken over the house. Mom woke up that morning expecting to see me at the breakfast table, but found only my letter beside her teacup. At first, she smiled softly, thinking it was one of my usual notes. But as she began reading, her smile disappeared. Her hands trembled. Tears fell on the paper before she even reached the last line. She called my name, but the house was quiet. She ran to my room, empty bed, open window, and nothing left but my old notebook and Dad's photo on the table. My brother came running. "What happened, Mom?" She handed him the letter, unable to speak. He read it, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't say a word. His throat tightened, guilt burning his chest. He remembered the times he mocked me, the times he called me lazy while spending the money I secretly earned. He looked around the house and at the lights that never went out, the fridge always full, the rent always paid. And it all made sense. My sister came in next, crying, "Where did he go?" But no one knew. That night, the family sat together, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. Every corner whispered my name. Every silence was a reminder of how they had failed to see me when I was right in front of them. Mom went through my things and found old receipts, tuition fees, grocery bills, rent confirmations, and all under my name. She pressed them against her chest and sobbed like she hadn't in years. Her son, the one everyone called useless, had been their strength all along. While they were drowning in regret, I was quietly healing. I moved to a bigger apartment, started hiring people for my company, and began saving for my future. I never told anyone where I was. Not because I was angry, but because I needed space to become someone new. Every evening I walked to a small cafe by the river. There I'd sit with my laptop and a cup of coffee, listening to the water flow. For the first time in my life I felt peace. Not because things were perfect, but because I had finally stopped living for their approval. Sometimes I thought of Mom. I missed her cooking, her laugh. Even though she hurt me unknowingly, I knew her heart was never cruel, just tired and blind to what was in front of her. I wanted to call her. To say, "I'm okay, Mom," but I wasn't ready yet. Not until I was sure she would listen, really listen. 2 months later, I checked an old email I hadn't opened in weeks. There was a message from my sister. Subject, "Please come home." The message was short. "We're sorry. We found everything, and the bills, your notes, your work." Mom cries every day. She reads your letter every morning. "Please, if you're okay, just let us know." Attached was a photo of my empty chair at the kitchen table. The chair I used to sit in every morning, sipping tea silently while they talked around me. Now it sat alone, untouched. I stared at the screen, tears welling up again. All those years of being invisible, and now they finally saw me. But too late. I didn't reply right away. I closed my laptop and walked to the river, the wind brushing against my face. I took Dad's letter from my pocket, the one that had saved me, and whispered, "You were right, Dad. Sometimes walking away is the only way to be seen." The return weeks later, I sent Mom a photo, me standing outside my new office building, smiling. Under it, I wrote only one line, "I'm okay, Mom, thank you for finally seeing me." Hours later, she replied. Her message was short, shaky, and full of love. "We're proud of you, son. Come home whenever your heart allows. I never truly left my family, I just left the version of myself they refused to see. Now, when I talk to them on the phone, they listen. They ask about my work, my health, my life, and every time Mom says, 'Take care, I love you,' I know she means it. They called me useless once. Now they call me the reason they learned what love really means. Sometimes you have to disappear to be seen. Sometimes you have to let go, so they can finally hold on. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or called worthless, remember this. Your silence isn't weakness. It's the strength of someone who knows their worth, doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion. You don't need to prove yourself to those who never tried to understand you. Just walk your path. And one day your light will speak louder than their words ever could. I cried again, but this time, not out of pain. Out of peace.